allowances. Our purpose in allowance wasn't so they had a regular income and could think, oh good, I have money. It was tied directly into expenses we knew we'd be paying for. Like an allowance.
Okay.
For like every week it was so much for Awana. They had dues. So we knew we were paying for that anyway. There'd be other things normally we would be paying for. You know, we knew if we were going somewhere we would end up for the cost of whatever we were going to eat or something like that. So we tied their allowance into what it would take to pay those things, plus a little bit more. So they'd have something they could work toward their own goals. But mostly it was things that we knew we were paying for anyways.
Oh, I see, because you're giving them the
money,
you're dividing it amongst these things, but within that money, there's still, it's a little bit for them, but really, hey, you're going to be using this for the things we kind of like.
It wasn't really costing us anything.
Got it.
But the purpose was transferring to them responsibility. That's the big difference. If it's an allowance to here's money and just do whatever you want with it, you just lost the whole reason for it. The purpose is to teach them these responsibilities so they'll have respect. They'll have respect for, in this case, property, their use of property, so that they'll have a better respect for other people's property. And that became part of it. So that's how we tied in how much we would give them. And actually, to me, it wasn't a hard thing because it's something my parents did with us. I don't know if they necessarily thought so deeply about it, but they would give us so much per week, and out of that, we were responsible for paying our dues for Boy Scouts. He wasn't going to pay it. It was up to us. And because if we would say anything, it's like, I gave you an allowance, what'd you do with it? That's your responsibility. Hence, you see the tie there. So it was something my parents did as I thought through, and then how to do this. That's how then we came to grips with how we're going to do this, the pragmatic part of it, how much. It's all about teaching them the responsibility, not about budgeting. The budgeting was part of it, but mostly it was they're going to take on responsibilities that normally would put them in mine anyways.
What age did you start allowances with them?
Oh, they were in Awana at what age?
When we started Awana.
Well, it's probably 8.
Okay.
They're about 8 years old or something like that. Or, I'm trying to think when we started giving them an allowance.
We didn't do it all that long.
We didn't do it all
They
that
started
long.
earning their own money.
Because then they started earning their own money.
So it was more later on, like later on until they could eventually.
Yeah, the allowance was only a short period of time in terms of
Awana
years.
started in 2000, because it was the year before the Twin Towers fell, I remember that. So it was around that time.
Well, it was also God's Champions before that, and that was our own program we came up with. It was interesting. And Raya and Michelle awards, and the final award was Daniel. So if you could get that, you know, we create our own award system, because we couldn't afford Awana. It's too expensive. World of Life was even more expensive, so we created our own.
That's when we were going to Tabernacle, a bunch of us at that time.
Yeah, he went up there like, well, I want to help. So but the idea of the allowance was simply is to give them responsibility so they can learn responsibility. And I'll use that as a broader thing. That's true for all these things. There's a lot of things you can do with your children in order to teach them the lesson they need to learn. And you'll transition out of it. We transitioned out of it because they started being an entrepreneur and earning their own money for other things. And as they were able to do that, then we would say is, like I mentioned before, traveling is like, we're not paying for that. You want that, you buy it. You know, we'll pay for this. And we usually would be upfront with them, if we're going to go somewhere, we will pay for this, this, and this. Anything beyond that is up to you. And if there's something planning in advance, it's you save up for this. We're going to California, you better save, because we're going to California, there'll be things you'll want. That's up to you. You take responsibility. But behind that all is, again, this whole thing, and I will stress this over and over again. I did the last seminar. What is your ultimate goal? It's training their hearts so that when they leave your home, they are responsible, respectable adults we're a blessing to society. I gotta keep that in mind. Otherwise, I get wrapped up in the moment and I lose sight of what I'm trying to actually do. And I'm just back to survival mode, and I don't want to be there. I want to be moving forward to where are we going to go, how am I going to train them, how are they going to get those skills. That included trying to teach them to do their own laundry. Now, Diane loves to do laundry, so it was kind of negative for her because she likes doing it, but they had to learn to do their own laundry, how to do some basic cooking so they won't starve to death. But we found out, like with Jonathan, that the first time he was down at Liberty, it was Liberty, he was down there for a while. He didn't like to cook, so it was peanut butter and jelly. And like, how do you keep living on just that? You know, or cereal. That's it. We sent him soup. I don't think he would eat the soup up.
He also had Pop-Tarts.
Pop-Tarts. But I don't think he'd even open a can of soup and eat soup.
He wouldn't heat it up.
It just, like, what?
He said, why should I learn to cook? I'm going to get married someday.
So it's like, it's just so you survive well where you are. Although the other day, for St. Patrick's Day, he actually called his brother up and pulled out a recipe for making some kind of Irish dish. And he said it went okay. So, but we wanted them to be responsible. But we had to keep that in mind as we're going forward of what lessons along the way. Problem is you're so busy in the moment, you lose sight of that. That's why teaching the parenting class so often, we release constant reminders. Oh yeah, I got to work on that. Oh yeah, I got to work on that. And I would have to say that helped us a lot in our parenting, is this constant reminder, oh yeah, I need to do this too. So this is not one of these things, it's okay, you hear it once and it's done. It's actually, you went through the whole parenting class once already. So this is second time through, but you're in a different stage of life. So now you've got children, it's like, oh wow, this is so important, where before it's like, that's an interesting concept. This is like, oh, this is life. Okay? And as they get older, it's a different stage, so different things pop out like, oh, I gotta do that. So.
Or you do something, and then afterwards you're like, oh wait, that didn't work the way, oh, I should have done this instead, and then, yeah, you go through it.
The problem with parenting is by the time you learn what you should be doing, the kids are out of the house.
See that?
It's like, ah! And then your mind gets fuzzy, so with grandkids, you don't remember what you did, you just want to spoil them, so.
I know, like with me, my brother, one of the things going back to the working for the money, it encouraged him to do it fast. He did it earlier than me because of what he saw that I was trying to get money for. So, you know, he saw that, oh, Phil's doing that, so we started almost around the same time because he saw there's profit to be made. Spent it faster than I did.
See, a wise younger sibling learns from their older one.
But he was the reverse. He was kind of like Jimmy, but he would get the money and just be gone.
That's a different lesson, and that's actually a good point. You're always evaluating your children for what they have learned, what they still need to learn, what they need to keep practicing. Because you're going to find out their weaknesses. They're going to be related to personality, temperament, but you're training their character. So if they tend to be a spendthrift, you're going to work on their character. If they're the opposite, you're still going to work on their character. So they start thinking through from a biblical standpoint of what does God want them to do as a steward of what has been entrusted to them. Because we don't work, we work for ourselves in terms of provide for ourselves, but we work so we also have enough to be able to provide for those who actually have needs. So that's where charity comes from. It's what God does within our heart. So let's talk about man's, our respect for nature. First of all, man has an eye for beauty. Okay? I've read philosophers and stuff on this, and no one seems to be able to define what beauty is. I will tell you this, it's not a modern art. I'm sorry, it's not beautiful. They must be trained to somehow ignore basic stuff. Now there are some things that can be done. Color schemes, certain things are perceived as more beautiful, just like in music. Certain sounds are perceived a certain way, but there's some cultural things that go behind that as well. But however you define it, man can recognize what's beautiful and what's not beautiful. It's kind of innate with us. That's something I think is God-given. And nature, there's a lot of beauty in nature. And I think that's even more substantial when you realize that nature, as beautiful as we think it is, it's cursed. You know, studying geology, studying flood geology on top of it, and then going out where you can see grand vistas, you see the destruction from the flood. Airplanes, especially flying over the west, you see where these giant lakes were and where you see all that stuff. So here's utter destruction, and yet we still found beauty in it. I just think that's something that is God's gracious to us. Tulips, for example, most of those very colored tulips, it's because they have viruses, they're sick, and that they're beautiful in their sickness. God has created beauty because the beauty then reflects something of the character of God, and we can praise Him for it. So we want to have respect for nature and for what is beautiful. 3 reasons to respect nature. First is because God created it. He made it. God made it. And it has imputed value from God, not just intrinsic value because it exists. It comes from Him. That value comes from Him. Genesis 1:1, He created all things. Ultimately, it all belongs to God who created it. So that's the first reason we respect nature. It's respect for the creator of it. The second is because Genesis 1:28, the man is to take dominion over nature, which we just talked about. You have a stewardship responsibility for what He's placed under your control. Whether it's large or small, you have a responsibility for that. The idea of dominion there is subduing it, managing it, nurturing it. Man's a steward accountable to God for it. You take what you need, but you give back too. Because our goal should be is we want each succeeding generation to be able to enjoy what God has created until Christ comes. Okay? That's a stewardship responsibility. Under private property, which is part of the American system, then you're responsible for your land, and because you transfer it to the next generation of your own children, you were much more careful about what you left them, because your legacy is your land. So in an agricultural society, you can see they would take good care of their land to the best of their knowledge. Now, knowledge is advanced, we understand some better things about how to take care of things, and I don't know if that sounded like happy kids.
Too happy.
Too happy. We are striving to take care of it. It's past the next generation, so there was always this idea, I want to improve it. And that actually is seen. You go travel around and you see these old farms and all these buildings, because it's generation upon generation, building, adding, increasing the value of what is there. Not of, I have it for a little while, I use everything I can, exploit it, and then get out. That's not stewardship, that's exploitation. We have dominion, we have responsibility to God, and we're going to be answering to God for what we do and have. Now, whether that's a huge farm, so it's not about land, or if it's just your home, or if it's an apartment you're renting. Once you have dominion over it, the goal should be is to take care of it well. Something we were taught in Boy Scouts, I still hold as a general truth that I think matches biblical principles. Wherever I go, when I leave, it should be better than when I came. I should be improving it. We were taught when we went camping, we would police the area, make sure any garbage there is cleaned up. The area should look better after I've been there than it did when I got there. Any apartments we've rented, houses we've rented, we've always sought to improve them. We've been here 28 years. My goal has been to leave the parsonage in a much better shape for whoever will be coming behind me whenever that happens. Let's face it, unless the Lord comes, someone will be coming behind me. because I don't want to live so long. I want it to be a blessing. That should be our mindset, and that's something we want to instill in our children. Wherever they go, people are glad that they were there, because when they left, it was better. Diane learned this as a babysitter. She was in great demand as a babysitter, because when she would go, she wouldn't just watch the kids, she would clean up everything. And so it's like, we love Diane to come here. The kids are well taken care of and everything is so nice when we get home. Well, what is that? That goes back to this basic thing. Whatever I have dominion over, what control, stewardship over, I'm trying to improve it. Period. That should just be part of our nature. That's, I think, a godly thing to do, and I think it reflects God in us. God has improved us. We're going to reflect that. Whatever we touch, we should want to improve. Now, the third reason for respect for nature is the preciousness of others. I want to respect nature because other people are also precious. Now, that certainly is going to fit, again, into the whole idea of whoever comes behind me that I've had dominion over, it should be improved. But not just in what I have dominion over, but any place I go. If I go on a hike, I want whoever's coming behind me to be able to see the same wonderful things I've seen. So I don't want to damage things in the process of enjoying it myself. I don't want them to see trash that I've left. I want to improve it. I'll pick up trash as I walk along. If I'm driving down the highway, I'm not throwing my stuff out the window for everybody else to look at on the side of the road. You know, I like Lady Bird Johnson had the whole thing of improving the highways and planting flowers and things like that along the interstates. And if you're driving long distances, you get to some of these places and they've had all these wildflowers planted in the median and stuff. It's like, it's refreshing to the eyes. North Carolina had these big plots of different things they would plant in. They've actually put a lot of effort into it. It made a drive very pleasant. Improving America's highways. Keep America beautiful. That was something coming from the 70s. Good idea. It makes it enjoyable. As opposed to going to some places like, it's just trash. You know, so you're trying to get, what kind of people live here? Right? People are precious, so I don't want them to have to deal with my trash. I want them to enjoy how much it is, whatever it is. So that's been a common thing we would do. Whenever we go, we do whatever we can to improve it. We don't want to be like, we went down to Florida. Remember, it was a beach south of the Fort Lauderdale Inlet. There's a state park. And we would go there during the week. And one, it was a little more remote. We didn't have to deal with people without much clothes on in Fort Lauderdale, because they wouldn't go drive all the way down around there. So it's a good place to take the kids. And we were there over the Memorial Day weekend. I won't go out on Memorial Day. I don't like the crowds. I'm not going out in that mess. So we were there a couple of days before Memorial Day, and then we went the day after Memorial Day. And it's like, is this the same place? It was absolutely trashed.
Covered.
Just covered in trash. We started talking to the park ranger, and it's like, yeah, they come up to you. The ranger is picking up trash, and they dump the trash in front of the ranger. What kind of people are these? Well, I'm not going to get into that. I'll embarrass people. They're trashy people. They're people who do not have any value of preciousness of others. Otherwise, they wouldn't do that. That's the heart attitude you want to instill in your children. So it means everything they do has that mindset. That means if they're walking around a trail, you've seen kids do this, and maybe you've done yourself. You know, you have one of these trees that have leaves on a long stem, and you grab it, go strip off all the leaves, and take the leaves, and go whoosh. Oh, that's nice, right? But what did you just leave behind you? Yeah, a stripped limb. That doesn't look very nice. So that's why we don't do it. Why do we not pick the flowers? Because I want other people to see them. Now, if they're my own flowers, I can pick them as I want and put them inside my house. I'll pick some of my daffodils and put them inside my house. But if I'm in a public park, I'm not picking the flowers. A, they don't belong to me. B, other people should be able to see them. Okay? So behind that is still this whole idea. I respect nature because it's made by God. What I have dominion over, I'm going to be responsible and give account of my care and stewardship of it. And other people coming behind me are precious. So I'm going to respect nature. I'm not going to abuse it. I'm going to try and do what is right so that it is improved. Maybe one more comment on this before we get to obedience. Why does man create parks? Why do we do that? Now, obviously, there's parks that just big lawns that people go out and play on it. But what about the parks where, you know, they're planting flower beds here and they're arranging all the trees in a certain area and landscaping and all that stuff? Why do we do that?
To walk around, to observe the beauty.
Yeah. So we can observe the beauty, so we can enjoy it. And there's one sense, we're trying to get back to Eden. You think about it. We're trying to get back to an environment that just is beautiful to enjoy, rather than the normal stuff of life. We want to make it look beautiful, and Eden would have been beautiful. But remember that even in Eden, Adam had a job, and it was to take care of it. So there's always been a job of trying to keep nature under control, or I should say even, or to direct it so that it is something that's pleasing to the eye, beautiful, well cared for, and healthy. Okay? That's why we do that kind of stuff. So public parks are wonderful things. We should be part of those who are promoting it and wanting keeping it beautiful, because we recognize what it's for. People are precious. Last comment on nature, be careful of the environmental movement. Some of it is fine. Certainly as a Boy Scout in the 60s and 70s, I learned a lot about environmentalism from Boy Scouts and care of nature and all that kind of stuff. And, you know, conservation, not exploitation. But there's a big hunk within the environmental movement that is pantheistic. Some even to the point they diminish man's value to that animals might even be more important than man. PETA is a group like that. That's wrong. It's sinful, actually. God has given us stewardship. We are to use the resources at our hand. We're to be careful how we use them. We don't want to cause damage to other people. But that goes back to people being precious. So I'll be careful how I do things, but it's there to be used. That's why God has placed it there for us. Orthodox Christianity is the best preserver of the environment, not the enemy of it. Man's sinful heart is the root of the problems when it comes to the environment, not Orthodox Christianity. We've been accused of that kind of stuff, but dominion is good for the environment. The idea that we are stewards of it is good for the environment. If you go around the world, you will find it's not the free enterprise system that has done the most damage to the environment. It's where it's all held publicly. Currently, go to communist China. You don't want to live there. You don't want to live where there's not a mindset that you're a steward to God. That is what changed here in America. As we became more knowledgeable about how to treat the environment, there was an effort toward, we want to be good stewards. So we are good stewards. Farmers are usually the best stewards. There was a lot of attack on hunters. Hunters are the best stewards of wild animal populations. Why? Okay, there's a selfish motive. They just want to keep hunting there, okay? So they're going to make sure there's more animals there that are healthy. So like Ducks Unlimited has been one of the groups that have preserved wetlands more than I think any other institution, because they wanted healthy duck populations because they like to hunt them. So there's a philosophical thing behind this. For us as Christians, we should be the best preservers of the environment because, again, God made it, we have dominion, a stewardship responsibility over it, and other people are precious. Can't do better than that. Okay? There is a handout that I put in there. It's called Basic Manners. That should be a lot of fun for you. There's a lot of them there. These are things that to teach your children. Now, some of them may seem a little archaic. A lot of these have been developed over years, certainly in a Western culture, of ways to demonstrate other people are precious. Even when it comes to table manners. That's what that was for. Now, some of it gets a little bit, I don't think you need to necessarily measure that the spoon has to be exactly this distance and this one distance. But why was that done? Because those people had enough money to pay someone to do it, and that when they came and sat at the table, it was like, this is a beautiful table setting. That's actually why they did it. You could just have the stuff sitting there, or you could do like what we do for buffet. Grab your everything here and work your way down, but having a beautiful table setting, it was simply to promote beauty. Right, am I correct on that, Lance?
Yes.
But you teach fundamentals of cooking.
I'm looking at it right now.
Fundamentals of table settings, but I think they have a
Yeah,
class
that's
of
about
table settings, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So these are simply developed simply to enhance the beauty of things. All these manners come back to that same basic principle. People are precious. How can we show respect, honor, and graciousness to them? That's what all the manners are about, period. Diane would teach the girls'
Girl time.
thing every once in a while, a whole thing on manners. And, we tried with the boys. We were a little successful here and there. Some things like, you boys. Yeah, when they have to be in the right environment, they can behave themselves. It's just at home sometimes, like, you animals. Am I correct?
Well, Jimmy mostly.
Well, he's the only one at home. Those are just good things to keep in mind. So don't fret over them, but do consider that these are kinds of skills you might teach your children as they're growing up. But again, it's not that they do this in order to earn something. It's that they have a mindset toward other people to treat them with honor and respect and kindness. And this is just part of that. Practical outworkings of that. All right? All right, let's talk about principles of biblical discipline. We'll be doing this again next month. We'll be talking about discipline and obedience and correction and that kind of stuff. Today I just want to introduce the opening thoughts of it, because we just talked about what we want to instill in our children are these characteristics. They have respect for authority, for parents, for age, for peers, for property, and for nature. These are character qualities into them. Including that was honesty. We don't lie to you. You can trust them. Somewhere along the line, we have to do that teaching, and that's discipline. Now, our tendency is to think that discipline is a negative. But as I put here in the beginning, the Bible speaks about discipline. It implies one thing, and that's training. Okay? And actually, it's heart training. That's discipline. Biblical discipline is all about getting into the heart of your child and helping shaping the character of your child. The cultural definition of discipline tends to be more towards spanking and punishment. That is an aspect of discipline, but that's not discipline. It's only one tool within the tool crib of things you use in disciplining your children. Biblical discipline is not the opposite of secular philosophy. It is something that is totally different from the secular philosophy that's out there now. Because we are after the heart, not the behavior. And I know with your toddlers, I finished this in the toddler seminar, behavior is the easy part. Okay, I know you don't believe that one or two. You can pull your hair out. But behavior is the easy thing. We're after something much more. We want to train their character and their heart. Ephesians 6:4, fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the discipline. Some versions say the instruction or admonition, instruction of the Lord. Okay, discipline is paideia. It is translated as chastening, nurture, instruction, chastisement, the whole training and education of children. These are definitions, which relates to the cultivation of mind and morals, employs for this purpose commands, admonitions, reproofs. It includes the training and care of the body. That's all part of discipline. 2, that which cultivates the soul, especially by correcting mistakes and curbing passions. And under that, instruction which aims at increasing virtue. 2 Timothy 3:16. That's the teaching, reproof, correction, instruction. I know I've talked about that verse in many, it's actually 3:17 sermons. The teaching is telling you this is the path of life. Reproof is telling them you just got off the path of life. Correction is getting them, here's how to get back on the path of life. And instruction is how to keep on the path of life. And that's what we're going to do with our children. Here's the way you're supposed to go. You got off the way. Here's how to get back. Here's how to stay on track. Okay? That's most of what our children need. What they're supposed to do, oop, you messed up. Here's how to get right. Here's how to stay right. All right? And then 2, it also includes chastening, chastisement of the evils with which God did some men for the amendment of actions, thoughts, and beliefs. That's all part of discipline, because God will discipline us. Now, instruction here is a different word, nouthesia. It literally means putting in mind, from 2 words, nous, mind, tethemi, which means to put. So to put into mind is the idea. Training by the word, whether encouragement or, as necessary, reproof, remonstrance. Its contrast to this is synonymous word paideia, stresses training by act, though both are synonymous. So those are the 2 verbs within that passage, Ephesians 6:4. The discipline and instruction of the Lord. Now, children are to be trained by both word and actions. We put into their minds, or whatever we put in their minds, needs to come out in their behavior. And the first part of that is training the heart in obedience. Now, there's a difference between Hebrew and Greek instruction and training. There's a difference between knowledge about versus understanding to do. Our society is Greek. We send people to school, they're instructed, and if they can repeat on a test, a written test, what they were told, we consider them educated. Correct? You do this and you can accumulate all sorts of degrees that say, I was educated, I can repeat back, or I actually like to say regurgitate back, all the stuff that was fed to me. Is that instruction? Is that in biblically? You see, the Hebrews had a whole different mindset. If you couldn't do it, you didn't learn it. Okay? I fortunately went to a polytechnic university. Behind that is a different philosophy. The CIA is a hands-on applied. If you cannot do this, you haven't learned. So whether you can repeat in your fundamentals class all the written stuff and they understand all the science behind it, if they can't apply it, they have not learned it.
They need both.
They have to do both.
Sure.
But the one is so they can do the other. All right? That's the difference. So in the kind of classes I had in college, you have the education of here's the knowledge, but you have to do something with that knowledge. If you couldn't do anything with that knowledge, you did not graduate. We had too many classes that were hands-on, applied. Culinary school is the same way. You've got to have the knowledge so you know what to do, but if you haven't learned to apply this and do it, you're not graduating with a degree. Period. Right? Let's understand that when it comes to our children, we want them to be able to do it. It's not about academic success, it's about success in life. The academic success is only a precursor to have the knowledge to be able to apply these things to life. That's a huge difference.
Even I know it's a little time, but it's even true with studying the Bible. You
It
can,
is.
you can have the verses, even demons, the Bible talks about, even the devil knows the Bible himself, but, you know.
Unfortunately, what has happened in so many of our institutions, even the whole development, and I'll try not to go very long on this one, the development of how we train people for leadership in churches is wrong. We've ended up thinking, I had people say this, oh, you've got your seminary degree, and now you're qualified to be a pastor. No, that's not what qualified me to be a pastor. 1 Timothy 3, Titus 1 are very clear what the qualifications are to be a pastor. Going to seminary only helps with one area, having the knowledge you need to be able to teach and refute. And that's it. Everything else is about character. And even with that knowledge, you have to apply it. And so we can have people who have their degrees, they can have all sorts of degrees, and they have no idea how to live according to it. The whole goal of knowing the scriptures is to live according to them to the glory of God. So being able to repeat it, so what? When we were in a career department at a large church, one of the guys who was actually became the pastor of that group, when he was in his teens, he actually won the award in Michigan for Bible memory, and he wasn't a Christian. He didn't become a Christian until he was in his 20s. And he tells the story that's part of his own testimony. He didn't know Christ. He knew all these scriptures and did not know Christ. So this again is the difference between a Greek mindset and a Hebrew mindset. Knowledge about or an understanding to do. Once he finally understood what all these verses were about, and he came to know Christ, he became a Christian and served Christ, his life changed. That's what we're going to do with our children. We're going to teach them the knowledge, that's important, but it's so they can apply it. If they can't apply it, we've not accomplished the goal. Period. Okay? So what is obedience? Let's talk about that. Are any more questions about that? Because that was a good point, Phil. I'm glad you brought it up. Okay. Obedience. Ephesians 6:1. Again, children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Colossians 3:20. Children, be obedient to your parents in all things, for this is pleasing the Lord. Obey here, hupakuo, to listen, to attend to, and so to submit to obey. Now, obedience is absolutely essential to family government. Family government. Without it, your efforts to train the heart are going to be thwarted. The opposite of obedience is foolishness, not to be confused with childishness. Childishness is innocent immaturity. Childishness is because they have physical limitations or mental inability. They're clumsy, they're ignorant. You have a toddler who's learning to use a cup. Why do you use a sippy cup? Because they're clumsy with their hands still. They knock it over. So you're trying to reduce the spills. What's foolishness? They're now 3 years old. They can handle physically the cup. They prove they can handle the cup, but they want to play with it. And you tell them, don't play with your cup. But they do anyways, and they knock it over. That's not childishness. That's foolishness, because it's rebellion against the instructions you gave them. Okay? A child who cannot do the math problem. Childishness. They haven't been instructed. Okay? You teach them, you train them. The older child who's been doing this math for a long time, but fails to do it and they have a consequence, that's foolishness. They're ending up with a problem because they didn't do some of the basic things they should be. But there was a book we had for a while called Math Curse.
We have it.
You found it. I thought that was lost a long time ago.
It's somewhere.
It's somewhere? I thought it was gone. Jimmy didn't like it. But it was about math and everything, everywhere there was math. So we kept trying to push it because the kids don't like math. And I thought one of the kids conveniently lost that book.
I thought we still had it, but
I haven't seen it for years. I remember the last time I was looking for it when the kids were young, like, what happened to that book? Sort of like the
the backers.
whacker that disappeared too. Yeah, we found it years and years later. up on top of the cabinet in the nursery here. He'd thrown it up there so we wouldn't know where it was. Oh, kids are smart. Childishness is, again, so they lack the ability, there's a physical inability, or they're just ignorant, they don't know yet. We can't require them what they don't know. We teach them, we instruct them so that they're no longer ignorant. Now if they disobey the commands concerning those things, now it's foolishness. Foolishness always has an element of rebellion in it. I want to do it my way rather than the way I was just told to do it, the way God says to do it, the way my parents just said to do it. So that's foolishness. Rebellion, defiance. They've been instructed, they willfully disobey. Now, children are born as fools. Foolishness is in the heart of a child. It's discipline that's going to help get that out. A couple of Proverbs and Psalms. Psalm 14:1, the fool has said in his heart, there is no God. Proverbs 12:15, the way of a fool is right in his own eyes. A wise man listens to counsel. 15:5, a fool rejects his father's discipline, but he who regards reproof is prudent. 18:2, a fool does not delight in understanding, but only in revealing his own mind. That one you find a lot. See, if you're understanding, you're humble. You want to find out from other people. You're always wanting to learn and grow. But if you're a fool, you think you already know everything, and so all you want to do is tell people what you're thinking. And we run into a lot of those folks, right? It's always interesting when someone comes up to you and tries to instruct you on something you're the expert, they don't know you're the expert. And you just smile at them and just, okay, I know what I'm dealing with here. They don't ask any questions, they just on they go, and like they have no idea what they're talking about. So we don't want to do that. We want to be people of understanding, who delight in understanding and learning. Now obedience, though, it's not through threats, it's not through bribes, it's not through manipulation, it's not through fear. All those things can get an outward conformity, but we're looking for obedience from the heart. It's not through methods of adult persuasion either with children. Children think as children, not adults. I have to stifle myself when I see some parent trying to reason with their child like they went to college. Like, it's a child. Actually, I know Gary used this illustration, was trying to convince his little child to put on a coat. And trying to reason, it's cold outside, you'll be much more comfortable. Except on and on he went with all these wonderful reasons. And then his wife finally came up and said, give me your arm, put the coat on. You know, that's all you had to do? Yep, that's all you had to do. We don't, it's a child. Understand you're dealing with a child. So it's not through that. A child just doesn't understand it. The parent must lead, direct, and guide their children by their authority. So you give them a command, they obey the command. That's how it works. Now what does obedience look like? Well, a great example is that of Abraham and Isaac in Genesis 22. God commanded him to take Isaac to the land of Moriah and offer him as a burnt offering in the mountains. Abraham obeyed God. We're also told in Scripture, actually believing God is able to raise the dead. That was Abraham's faith. Now what's amazing here, though, is Isaac. Isaac complied with his father. He even asked the question, we've got the wood, we got the fire. Where's the sacrifice? Remember Abraham's answer? God will provide. Okay, Abraham is how old? Over 100. Okay? You got a teenager. How did he get Isaac bound? Now, if you were Isaac and Dad said, come over here, I'm going to bind you up and I'm going to burn you up today, what would you do? I know what I would do. You're not catching me, Dad. Because I know you can't run that fast. Okay, Isaac's amazing here. He obeyed. Okay? So Abraham did three things. He rose up early. There's no delay on his part. He prepared himself. He took responsibility to obey God. And then he did what God commanded him. Those are the blanks. He rose up early. Number 3, he did what God commanded, or that which God commanded him. He followed through and did it. That's obedience. That's what it looks like. And we assume that's what Isaac did too. He did what his dad said. 4 characteristics of biblical obedience then. It's to be immediate, because delayed obedience is disobedience. Keep that in mind. Use it on your children. Delayed obedience is disobedience, so it's immediate. Second is to be complete, because partial obedience is also disobedience. 3, it's without challenge, verbal or physical expressions. So that includes their face and their stance. There's not a challenge to it. And 4th, it's without complaint. Whether verbal or physical expression against their face, their stance, they're not complaining about it. That's biblical obedience. Self-control is a virtue that gives rise to study and skills, and we're requiring them to be obedient so they learn self-control. As I said earlier, external control until they can control themselves internally. So when they're really young, that external control, that obedience, is teaching them the characteristics they need for self-control. Again, those are moral skills. But that self-control are the same skills they're going to need for success in the rest of life, including educational and intellectual pursuits. Because in order for a child to be able to go to an academic environment to learn math, whatever else it is you're doing, guess what they have to be able to do? Sit in the chair and pay attention. To read the book. Not to be distracted by everything under the sun. Not to pursue gains, but actually keep focused on that item, whatever it is. That's self-control. We teach our children when they're young, they're coloring books. Okay, it's a fun activity, but what actually we're teaching them to do? Self-control. Can you color this and stay within the lines? That's learning control of their hand movements, and not to get mad and go, I'm mad. Okay? Because I went outside the line I got mad about, so I just destroyed the whole thing. That's all self-control, right? So those are skills that are needed in order to pursue anything in academics. So there's a lot that goes on here. Now, the nature of God's standard is this: immediate, complete, without challenge, without complaint. And he requires obedience from his children above all else. In fact, he places a premium on obedience. In 1 Timothy 15, you have the story of Saul and his partial obedience, which means complete disobedience to God's command. And instead of wiping out Amalek, he brings back Agag and the sheep and the cows and everything else. And Samuel has to confront him, and Saul keeps trying to get out of it. Well, it's the people made me do this. Well, no, they were brought back to sacrifice to your God. And finally, he just confronts them. To obey is better than sacrifice. What you've done is rebellion. It says the sin of divination. It's rebellion. This is what God requires. He wants us to be obedient to him. Now, for our own standpoint, that's practically wise anyways. He's God. He knows better. Right? Your children should recognize that you're wiser than they. Do they? They think they're wiser than you. So we treat God the same way. But obedience is recognizing that, no, I need to obey. God is wiser than me. His ways are better than my ways, and he has a plan, even though I don't know what it is. So I need to do that. Children need to do that with us. Especially the younger ones, they need to understand, they need to obey mom and dad. That's all there is to it. No negotiation or anything else. As they get older, we'll talk about an appeal of how to bring more information to you to make a better decision. But the young ones, they simply need to obey. That's part of training their character. Okay? And again, the ultimate goal in obedience is a self-generated initiative that the child thinks about and then does it on his own. As we were talking a bit earlier about Danny, you know, is for her to, on her own, make her bed, not have to be reminded, on her own see, okay, you know, it's getting a little dusty here, I can dust, I will do this. That's where we're going for that. Because when they can do that, and they are doing that, we know we have reached their heart. Their heart's generating the actions. But you're going to have to work through all the lower levels to get to that point, okay? Picking trash, doing their chores, all that stuff is part of moving toward that goal. Now below that self-generated initiative is prompted obedience. The child does it willingly and happily, but you got to remind them. You did that with Danny for a while. It's like, did you make your bed? That's a reminder. Oh, I forgot. And she goes up and does it, right? Now that's better than it was before, but below that one is the forced obedience. Danny, you need to make your bed. And she was there at one time. Well, you need to make your bed. So she goes up and does it, right? Okay. So you can see that's a lower level. And before that, it was under really duress that she would do it. Okay? Now that's going backwards, but it actually works the opposite, okay? It may be duress to begin with. It may be, I'm doing it, but I'm not happy about it. And they'll let you know they're not happy about it. And then you're going to keep working until they may be prompted, but they'll still do it, not a problem, until they're doing it on their own. That's where we're trying to get them. And once they're that self-generated, they're doing it on their own, without even being prompted, you know you've reached their heart with the lesson. That's what you're after. But we have to overcome some things as parents. So here's some things that we need to be aware of how parents wrongly trained obedience. Many parents are guilty of training their children to be non-responsive to instruction the first time it is given. Desiring obedience, they actually train their children in disobedience. So the first is the threatening, repeating parent. The parent hopes for, should put wishes for compliance, but not willing to enforce it. And so that trains a child not to respond the first time. So we just eliminated the immediate. Here's not immediate, because you train the child not to respond immediately. And so they, not. The child not to respond the first time. The threatening, repeating parent then fosters a fearful, subjective response. The child's kind of guessing of when they should or should not obey. The failure of the parents to maintain a consistent standard then only serves to lure the child into sin by causing him to think he can get away with anything. Okay? So that's threatening, repeating, threatening, repeating. If you don't, I'm going to, and then you don't. So, empty threats. You just keep repeating yourself. You escalate. Okay, that can get to the point where you finally are going to take action, but at what point? Then there's the bribing parent. The bribing parent, Exodus 23 verse 8 warns, a bribe blind, discerning, and perverts the words of the righteous. Bribes are not good. This trains a child that obedience is negotiable. I'll obey if you pay me enough. If my reward is enough, I'll accommodate you. That's the idea. And so the parents barter with their children in hopes of gaining a temporary obedience, and it'll only be temporary. And so they use bribes as well as, by the threats, even scare tactics, to gain temporary control. Bribing parents train their children to obey for a wrong motive. And they often use appeals to flesh, like candy. If you be a good girl, I'll give you candy when we get out at the checkout line. Children should be rewarded for obedience, but they should not be obedient to gain the reward. There's a big difference, because the quest is to train the heart. It's one thing if they've been a really good child and you just want to give them a reward, okay, give them the candy. But as soon as they start asking for the candy on the checkout, you've been bribing them, because that's how they're taking it. There's a big difference between the two. So bribing is, if you will do this, I will do this for you. That's bribing. Threatening, if you don't do this, I'm going to do this nasty thing to you. Then there's the misuse of compassion, where you're negotiating in the conflict. The parent insists on a standard of complete obedience before a conflict, But once the conflict begins, they start changing the line of what's required, thinking that's being compassionate to them. Here's why you don't negotiate in a conflict. The child needs to be willing to surrender totally, because that's the first step towards total freedom of self-rule. We teach our children to surrender first, so we can then later give them the freedom they can handle. What exactly they're surrendering? They're surrendering their self-will. That's what we're asking them to surrender. And in conflict, they need to surrender. Because without that complete surrender, there's always going to be a war going on. There's always going to be an underlying conflict. They need to surrender their will to your will. Children, be obedient to your parents. This is right before God. That's the command. In addition, grace does not have meaning without justice. So they won't understand grace if you're always negotiating. So don't neuter God. There are times to show mercy and grace, but if that's always what you're doing, then mercy and grace lose their meaning and they're simply expected. Because God is patient and long-suffering, a lot of people don't take God seriously when he says there's going to be a consequence. And they keep trying to find some way about the natural consequences in this life. But those are all precursors to there is a consequence once they stand before him in judgment. Now these three can be combined together. So the mother who first coaxes, that's bribing, then gets into threatening, and then starts bargaining to pretend to punish, and then finally punishes a little bit. You do that, you're only making a bad situation worse. No child will respond to God's standard if parents do not require obedience, and if arbitration and bartering are common. Such indulgences are outside the parameters of true love. So what do we need to do? What are the principles of instruction? As obedience relates to children, again, Colossians 3:20, God makes his requirement clear. Children, obey your parents. But immediately following that, there is a warning in verse 21. Fathers, do not exasperate your children that they may not lose heart. The warning in verse 21 does not compromise the standard presented for the children in verse 20. Rather, it reminds the parents that biblical authority is not some cold, callous, arbitrary thing. The very nature of obedience frustrates the child. Let's face it, obedience frustrates us too, right? But does that mean we ignore the standard? And no, most certainly not. We are to train children to the standard and guard against unnecessarily exasperating them in the process. That means we do have compassion on them to make sure they understand. We make sure that they have understood the instructions. We make sure they are capable of carrying out the instructions. That's so we don't exasperate them. It's terrible to require something of your child when they can't do it. Okay? That's exasperating. It's terrible to require something of your child when you haven't been clear what you want them to do. They're left confused. Or even when they're getting two different instructions from both parents, what do they do? Now we'll talk about what to do in another seminar about an appeal process, but at this point, we just need to understand that as parents, we need to be sure our child understands and is capable of following the instruction. Okay? We're clear in our expectations and then can deal with them properly. So how do we communicate instructions? That's going to be part of this. If you speak in a way which requires an answer action, you should expect, that's the blank, an immediate and complete response. So this goes back to what we talk about the first time obedience of having them come. Okay? Use a voice command. You say it once, they should obey. You should require from them a verbal response. Yes, mommy, yes, daddy, or whatever you want from them, but it should be a verbal response. They have heard you. Okay? The actions that should be with that is coming or whatever else you told them to do. Yes, mom, yes, dad, and they come, or if you told them to go do something else, yes, mom, and they're immediately going to do it. Now, context is also important here. That's where compassion comes in. Because this idea of first-time obedience is a legalistic thing. It's always understanding the context that we may judge what they did or didn't do correctly. An example here is you tell them, turn the light off, get in bed, go to sleep. Okay? Be quiet. They should do that, right? What if a younger sibling who's in the same room falls out of bed? What should they do then? So you don't want them fearing turning on the light and coming and getting you if the younger sibling is hurt or needs help. You want them to be able to come down. That's context. That's not disobedience. That's actually obeying the higher law that you should have been teaching your heart. Care and compassion for others. Even at risk for themselves, you know, coming down, you know, my brother or sister, they fell out of bed, they're crying, can you come and help? Okay? That's different. But otherwise, we should expect them to do what we ask them to do. Next, when giving instructions, say what you mean and mean what you say. The blank. Say what you mean what you say. Don't give instructions you do not intend to have obeyed. That exasperates children. Okay? If you want to give them options, that's great. You can ask them a question. Would you like to eat now? Would you like to go to bed now? You want to give them the option. If you want them to actually go to bed, then tell them, it's time to go to bed, go get ready, go get in bed, whatever it is. So say what you mean what you say, clear instructions, this is what's expected. Don't give a command as a question. It's fine to ask questions, but not if it's a command. Okay? There's no better way to teach a child not to obey than give him instructions that you have no intention of enforcing. Okay? 1, understanding objective and subjective obedience. When parents require the standard, the child alone determines when he will be punished. Because the consistency of God's moral standards make obedience objective, since the parent does not act arbitrarily. This is what's required. If you do not do this, what happens? So that's up to them. If you obey, this is. If you disobey, what's going to happen? We use that a lot with our kids. What did we tell you? Well, if I didn't, so what's going to happen? This. Okay, then go prepare yourself. It's completely objective on our part. We don't have to be angry, we don't have to be bent out of shape or anything. It's just, you know what was required, and you didn't do it. And you know the consequences, so let's bring about the consequences, whatever they may be. Understand that by nature, children tend to be gamblers. This is why the threatening, repeating, the bribing, doesn't work. Because if you let them get away with it, they'll try the next time. Maybe I'll be able to get away with it again. We don't want to get there. As expressed here, they'll put their foot tippy-toe across the line, enjoy their sin, and hope they get back before you recognize that they've done it. Anything less than first-time obedience brings subjective punishment. The child is governed by his parents' present resolve, and that is what keeps the child in a state of continuing conflict, confusion, and security. The child is guessing, at what point do you actually require what you just said? At what point am I supposed to obey you? Because instead of being objective, it's now subjective. And consequences are no longer tied to disobedience, but to the mood and the whim of the parent at the moment. Okay? Be careful now because she's in a bad mood. Oh, she's in a good mood, we'll get away with anything. No. Okay? You know, that's wrong. It's whatever the mood is. Obey, blessing. Disobey, curse. Isn't that what God told the children of Israel? Okay? And understand this, the children will obey when they know you're serious. So, guessing game. They can obey at 1 or 10, or any number in between when they know you're serious. Why make them guess at which? And why have to keep counting? Right? You used to count, right?
Yeah,
You don't have to count anymore. It's a lot easier on them too, right?
Okay, I count in the classroom, so I always thought, okay, that works, so I should put your word for them.
But it's confusing. It's like, at what point? You know, does it have to get to a certain pitch in your voice before they obey? or your face has to turn a certain shade of red with the blood vessels popping out as you're so mad, then they'll obey. They'll obey when you want them to obey. So just there's no guessing about it. It's easier on everybody. Okay? And then again, it is, you don't have to do that if you teach and obey the first time right away with a happy face. And immediate obedience in time means now. And here's the A's, okay? First A, yes, Mom, Dad, whatever. Clear communication. The child has just verbally committed themselves. Okay, you give instructions and they answer. And by the way, here's where you can get away from the grunting.
Yeah.
That's not communication in our home. It can be communication in somebody else's home. Whatever you require, but require it. That's going to be part of it. Whatever you want them to say, that's it. Okay? Don't let them degenerate into animals grunting around the house. Okay? If you want them to grunt, just make sure it's the correct words. But that's up to your home. All right? It's clear communication. Next, look at your face. That's accountability. It's requiring eye contact. Make that a standard practice, as you were talking about when they come in the classroom. You look at me and acknowledge. Then you can come in the classroom. When you're giving instructions to your children, especially if you know how to make eye contact. Make it a focused skill. Remember, we used to kids, Jimmy especially was this one. It's like, look right here, Jimmy. And you start looking like, right here. He starts wandering eyes. Right here. Okay. And you give him the instruction. Amazing what it does. Okay? It can make a big difference. Otherwise, you don't know if he's really getting it. Also, a respectful position. Okay? When we were having trouble, and especially if they were going to stand there at attention and look right here, now we give the instructions. Okay? Otherwise, they're still going to be respectful as we give the instructions to them. Not being distracted by something else. It's not arbitrary. Okay? That's how to make sure you're actually communicating clearly so that you're not exasperating them and you know they understand. That's part of it. And then timely compliance. The aid here is the counting I mentioned could be an aid if it's only as a warning, but not in the midst of the conflict. That's the difference. Okay? You can say, I mean, here's a nice one too. It's the kids are watching something on, say, television or something, or playing a game. Is, hey, 5 minutes. Make sure they understand what the 5 minutes are, especially young. They don't understand that. When the clock gets to that, you know, this is what's going to happen. Okay, so finish up your game. Agree with me. That is you showing compassion to them. It's not arbitrary. You're paying attention to what they're doing. So give them a warning, or we're going to have dinner. Diane was very good at this. Is we're going to have dinner in a little bit. Finish what you're doing. Get clean up so we want dinner. That avoids frustrating your child. Sometimes the timing of your instruction is as important as the instruction. So you be compassionate, don't be arbitrary. Understand what your child's going through, give your instructions appropriately, make sure they're clear, understood, and hold them accountable for what you just gave them. So if I ask my child to do something and he disobeys, my child is in sin. Okay? That's his rebellion. If I am characterized by repeating myself in hopes he'll obey, I am the one in sin. Sin is the blank in both places. If I undermine the significance and importance of the first time obedience, I'm encouraging my child to disobey. I am teaching him to sin. Judicial parenting does not allow parents to reward sin by doing nothing about it. So obedience and disobedience are moral acts, not individual preferences. So the key principle here, calling a child a first-time obedience is not a problem for the child as much as it is for the parent. Such a standard calls parents to consistency. And yes, I do know there are those times we're just wishing, begging, praying, please obey, because I don't want to go go through all the stuff I have to go through if you disobey, right? You're in the stores, please obey, okay? And you're willing to come, you're in a rush, okay? What do I need to do just to get this child to get through the moment? Understandable, but negative. Child's training is more important. Sometimes mean you gotta leave what you're doing, abandon it, and realize, today the lesson is back to first time obedience. When you wanted to be much farther than that. Go back and teach the same lesson over and over again. The earlier you train the child's heart, the easier it is on everybody. The longer you wait, the more difficult. And you definitely don't want to have this kind of conflict when they get into adolescence, or even pre-adolescence. It's just a lot worse. If you are consistent, it is a lot of work through age 3 or so. Some will be 7 or 8. They're just more stubborn. But if a normal child, it's by age 5, as we gave in that outline before. If you've gotten their heart by then it's a whole different way of living. If you haven't, it is harder and harder. If it waits till they're teenagers, you're probably going to lose them. Because what you have to go through then to gain them, it's going to be more than you're going to be willing to sacrifice. That's going to be your own selfishness coming out. And they're going to be much more resistant to it. It's still possible, but extremely difficult. So do it while they're young. Do it while they're still trainable, moldable, gain their heart, and then there'll be a blessing from then on. Now there's quite a few different handouts I gave you. Hopefully these are a little bit helpful to you. There's a parent type characteristic checklist. Kind of you can go through that and see what you're characterized by now and see what you need to change. It's just helpful. It's a self-evaluation for that. There's a sheet for family rules. All right, this is what Diane and I use in our home. It doesn't mean that you use it in your home, but hopefully it's like a template for you to figure out for your own home what you want. We actually posted this, and as Kyle's children got older, we were like, what's the rule here? We just pointed back to them as a these are the things that we're requiring of you. Develop your own. Again, this is just a template for you. You will figure out what you want for your own home and why. There's also some material here. This is from Doorpost about using Proverbs, the book of Proverbs. Excellent thing to be doing with your children. The Proverbs are just full of all sorts of wisdom. Here's one example they had of characteristics of go to the ant. They illustrate a little bit, and that's just really helpful. Your child learn, if you teach your children a lot of Proverbs, it's a guide for life. Just a lot of wisdom. And then there's several pages there, just for your own convenience, of Proverbs upon Proverbs dealing with different subjects. Okay? So you can find the proverb to have them memorized for whatever you're dealing with. Or find some other verses as well. When you have a problem area or something you want them to grasp, teach them the scripture that goes with that. Have them memorize that. Have them repeat that. That's hiding God's word in their hearts so you can build upon that. And then the last page was simply some recommended parenting resources. Quite a few good things on here, some really good books. All right, we will pass time. Actually, we're right about the time, but we started a little late. Questions? Okay, next month, the first Saturday in May, we're going to be dealing with carrying out discipline, punishment, rewards, all the stuff that are part of implementing what we talked about today in obedience. We have to be able to do this and put it in a child's heart. And there's some basic things that we should know in order to not exasperate them, like we talked about, help them learn. We'll see next month, most of discipline is positive, and we'll emphasize that. But since most of the questions end up with how do you deal with the negative aspects, we'll probably spend more of our time answering those questions and dealing with that. But again, most of your parenting should be positive. It's a wonderful thing to train your children and start seeing them grasp important biblical principles, even though I think early in life sometimes you just feel like the child got up and said, today's a good day to die. And I'm taking her with me. But keep hard, you keep working at it, and you start seeing your character change. And then you go to the next lesson. And that's one reason why we probably get a little discouraged, because there's always the next lesson. But start looking back to see where your child's already been and how much they're already gaining. That's the positive part. And that encourages you to continue on. You've got many years ahead of you until they're an adult who's a blessing to the world. You're training until then. Parenting is not for the faint-hearted, and it's not a short-term commitment. It's long-term. But what a blessing of life, too. Anything you want to add? Let's pray. Thank you, Father, for, again, your blessings to us. Thank you for the children that you've entrusted to us that are our own or adopted. Thank you as well that you also allow us the privilege of influencing other children and other parents. Father, we recognize as we have it correct with our children, you open up new doors of ministry to others in following in your ways, that our children and their children can become blessings instead of curses to the world, as they would follow you from the heart. In Jesus' name, amen.